7 is the number of completion, so you do something 7 times to complete whatever the process is. And of the rest of the oil that is in his hand shall the priest put upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot, upon the blood of the trespass offering. And the remnant of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall pour upon the head of him that is to be cleansed, and the priest shall make an atonement or a covering or a protection for him before the Lord. Now, if there's no sin involved here, how come you need a covering? How come you need protection? I'm just saying that when we're looking for the causes of this, verse 19, and the priest shall offer the sin offering and make an atonement for him that is to be cleansed from his uncleanness, and afterward he shall kill the burnt offering. The priest shall offer the burnt offering, the meat offering upon the altar. The priest shall make an atonement for him, and he shall be clean. So there's the end of the process. That's if you can bring the lamb and the larger animal. But in verse 21, if he be poor, and many of these people, like the one that Yeshua touched and healed, are likely to be poor. They're likely to make their living by begging. That doesn't mean necessarily that they have to, but they're likely to be poor. And so if he be poor and cannot get so much, then he shall take one lamb for a trespass offering to be weighed, to make an atonement for him, and 1/10 deal of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, and a log of oil. 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons shall, as he is able to get, and the one shall be a sin offering, and the other burnt offering. And he shall bring them on the 8th day for his cleansing to the priest, to the door of the tabernacle of congregation before the Lord. And the priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. Is this a repeat? No. And he shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering. The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering and put it upon the tip of the right ear of him. And I'm not sure what happened there. I don't really need to read all that again. But suffice it to say that the right ear, the right hand, the right toe, be careful what you hear, be careful what your hands do, be careful where you go. You're totally be dedicated to God and to doing the right thing. That's what that's. And so let's skip down a little bit here. You have the process of the pigeons, and I don't mean to just skip over because it's not important, but I wanted to go down through it for us to see how detailed and elaborate it is, which to me indicates that there's something very important going on. And so Leviticus 14:32, and this is the law of him in whom is the plague of leprosy, whose hand is not able to get that which pertains to his cleansing, talking about the birds. So here's some understanding to go with wisdom. There's a difference between having this form of leprosy, Zara, being healed of it, and being cleansed of it. They are not all synonymous. They are related to one another, but they're not the same thing. The first two have directly to do with God, the having it and being healed of it. But the being cleansed of it is the responsibility of the priest. The priest is to examine and judge it, but he's to use God's standard. And I didn't read, right now we won't read through all the things about, well, if it's under the skin, if it's white, and so on. But the priests had to learn all this stuff. It's like, if you're going to preschool, this is something you have to learn because you're going to have to be prepared to examine these kinds of people and judge. And so, we were talking about what is the cause of this and what is it. And we I'm pretty sure because descriptions of it, plus historical, Jewish interpretations of it. But I got this from the Jewish Encyclopedia, and it has to do with the leprosy and so on. So I'm going to read it to you. There is much reason to believe that the segregation of lepers was regarded, at any rate at certain periods, more in the light of a religious ceremonial than as a hygienic restriction. And we noticed last night that some of the commentators they tended to say that this was some kind of communicable disease. And traditional Jewish interpretation does not go along with that. Not maybe that there aren't some who might say so, but that it was not a hygienic restriction to exile them out of the camp. It was a ceremonial, religious restriction. They weren't afraid of catching it from that individual. And so Zarat was looked upon as a disease inflicted by God upon those who trespassed his laws, a divine visitation for evil thoughts and evil deeds. Now, I read you the process there because of those sin offering, trespass offering, and burnt offerings that are a part of this cleansing process. And so, I don't know who it is that wrote this particular article in there, but I'm just saying that what he's saying is not groundless. Every leper mentioned in the Old Testament was afflicted because of some transgression. Now that doesn't mean that there weren't others who aren't mentioned that it's some other case, but what the writer here is saying, that when you look at the record of the thing, every leper was afflicted because of some transgression. So Miriam uttered disrespectful words against God's chosen servant Moses, and therefore she was smitten with leprosy. Joab, with his family and descendants, was cursed by David for having treacherously murdered his great rival Abner. Gehazi, who was Elisha's servant, went out to Naaman and contrary to what Elisha told him, tried to get some payment out of it. So Gehazi provoked the anger of Elisha by his mean covetousness, calculated to bring the name of Israel into disrepute among the heathen. And so, as you recall, he went out to Naaman and said, my master's changed his mind, because he turned down the payment. And so he was given, I don't remember what it was, but anyway, some valuable kinds of things. And what happened was that he got the leprosy that Naaman was healed of. But it's because of his covetousness and his deception. And so King Uzziah was smitten with incurable leprosy for his alleged usurpation of priestly privileges and burning incense on the golden altar of the temple. And so it would have been quite natural for the people, by looking at things afterward, looking back on it, it's what we call the a posteriori reasoning, to have regarded persons afflicted with Zarat as transgressors. They had violated the laws of God, and their transgressions had been great, else they would not have been so afflicted. Viewers who hold the view that the exclusion of lepers had chiefly a religious significance conclude from these facts that lepers were obliged to remain outside the camp because they were regarded as likely to morally infect others. And this is the idea behind, deal with transgressors this way or this way or this way, so that you can keep evil out of Israel. And we look around us in our nation today, and we see all sorts of ideas being, proposed and advocated, and we see our nation in moral chaos and all the things that result from that in terms of family disruption and problems and so on. And it's because we do, as a nation, we basically do not deal with evildoers scripturally. And there's a whole thing out there about, prison isn't punishment, it's a rehab. Well, I don't mind rehabbing criminals as far as that part goes, but prison is basically for punishment. But not in this country. So I'm just saying that part of why the regulation for before exiling them outside the camp was to get rid of the moral infection, not the physical. As long as the signs of the disease remained upon them, they were obliged to live outside the camp. It is reasonable to believe that although biblical and modern leprosy are in all probability not the same disease, because the descriptions of it are not the same, the present custom of segregating lepers had its origin and stimulus in the biblical example of segregating those afflicted with Zarah. Had the Bible never been written, it is probable lepers would today be permitted to go in and out among their fellows unhindered, for leprosy, modern leprosy, is a much less actively communicable disease than several other well-known affections in the case of which segregation is not practical. It's not practiced. And so we do have a basic, quarantine law that if somebody has certain diseases, they're quarantined. But many communicable diseases that are highly communicable, we will not quarantine. And AIDS is one of the major ones in our society. We don't quarantine people with it. And there's several reasons for it as far as that part goes. But the point is that segregation of those with Zarah was a result of people believing, and I believe rightly so, that they had committed some trespass and it was punishment from God. So if that's true, thanks a lot. This is part of Psalm 11. It says to the chief musician, Son of David, the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids try that you are immune. The Lord tries the righteous, but the wicked and him that loves violence his soul hates. Upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire, and brimstone, and a horrible tempest. This shall be the portion of their cup. For the righteous Jehovah loves righteousness. His countenance beholds the upright. Now I want to back up a minute. In verse 5. The Lord tries the righteous. So let's just assume that we're righteous. Do you think God doesn't therefore pay any attention to what you're doing or not doing? No, the opposite is true. He watches you very closely. You are on constant trial. In Numbers 6:22, and Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, on this wise you shall bless the children of Israel, saying to them, Jehovah bless you and keep you. Jehovah makes his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Now note this one. Jehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. What did David say about the Lord's countenance? His countenance beholds the upright. Now there's nothing wrong with Aaron saying, Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. That's a part of what is right. But if you're sitting there in the congregation and you're doing something that you end up doing, then you're not going to get the countenance of a smile and well done, thou good and faithful servant. You're going to get some type of correction and discipline. And Zarahat is not, all inclusive, but it's one of those kinds of corrections that God applies. And so, you can say, oh, woe is me, I got Zarat. I mean, if you have it. Or you can say, God is just. I'm going to stay outside the camp until I'm healed, and I'm going to do my best to get my life straightened around. And after examining myself and seeing what it is I've been doing wrong, I'm going to quit that. But I'm going to accept the correction that God has given me. And there's no, the fact that this whole cleansing procedure is set there for us to observe, is that there's hope for a cure. You don't necessarily have to die with, not because of, but with Zara'ah. God is holding out hope for you to be cured, healed, and cleansed. And so, it's not the lake of fire. Yeah, that's it. You end up there, that's where you stay, and there is no hope. But as long as you're alive, and as long as there's a possibility of your repentance, there's a possibility of your healing. And Yeshua walking around among them, we don't have, that I know of, very many extra biblical records of people being healed. But that doesn't mean that there weren't. This means that they weren't all included in the book, because John says that the sky wouldn't be big enough and the ocean enough ink to write all of, there is to know about God. So there's two things here that I want to point out to us is that it's not the end of the world for you, but this particular thing is viewed, and I believe rightly so, as God's punishment for ill behavior. And it doesn't do any good to punish somebody for something they can't help or they can't do anything about. And so that's why, right or wrong, as far as somebody being insane, it's why we don't punish insane people for doing the wrong thing. We can find them and we try to treat them, and rightly so as far as that part goes. And we don't take 5-year-old kids that may have done something seriously wrong and put them in prison for the rest of their lives, because we know that while, okay, they're smart enough to understand a few things, but we distinguish between children that have not fully developed the concept of right and wrong to an adult who's had plenty of time to figure it out. And so what I'm getting at is that God is not doing something futile in somebody's life when he visits them with Zara'ah. Think about that for a minute. God is not doing something futile. He's not trying to destroy anybody. And we can broaden this out to whatever the correction is. God is not punishing you as an act of futility, saying that I'm going to do this, knowing that it's not going to do any good. It's why, we have the expression, are you beating a dead horse? It's because beating a dead horse is futile. You're not going to change his behavior down. And so, God is not a God of futility. He has a reason for what he's doing it. And while it's hard for us in general, not just with this here, but anything that God does to correct us, it can be hard on us. In the hardness of it, quite often, if not always, is because of you're our daddy. I used to tell some of my students, I wouldn't go through with this if I thought that you would correct this without me doing it. Because I'm not punishing you for the sake of punishment. I'm punishing you to get you to change your behavior. The problem is, though, that even if you tell me you will change, I don't know whether I can leave you or not. And so, I might go out on a limb and I might let you off, but then the problem with that is that will you believe me next time I tell you I'm going to do this for you? And so, I'd walk them through all this before I'd give them maybe 10 swats with a whip-ball bat. But I want them to understand that, you're here because of you. And you're going through this because of you. And you wouldn't have to be going through this if all I'd had to do was tell you to stop it, and you stopped it and behaved yourself. But that didn't get your attention. And so it's the same with us. When God visits something like this on somebody, it's because they didn't listen the first time. When he said, don't do that, they ignored it and they went ahead and they did it. And so God comes up on your mind with 10 swats and a whip-ball bat to get your attention. And so I'm pretty sure, I never did ask them, well, how'd you like that? But I'm pretty sure if I would have, they'd said I didn't like it. I know from experience on being the receiving end of it, I didn't like it either when I was little in Missouri. But God's not asking you to like it. Right? He's not saying, I'm being hard on you here, and I know it hurts, but I'm not asking you to like that. I'm asking you to change your behavior. And so, that's why that, I said, thank you, God, with a little irony in my voice. To kind of throw you off track a little bit. But we can honestly tell God, thank you for the discipline and the correction in my life, no matter what form it takes, no matter how hard it is. Because it's for my own good. And if I will use it like God intends it to be used, I can be forgiven, I can be cleansed, and I can be restored to the community itself. Just like these lepers, once they went through this whole process, they were declared clean, they could come back into the community, function once again just like everybody else. That's what God is after. And when he says here in that blessing about his countenance and give you peace, if we want peace with God, and it should be something we highly value, then all we have to do is do the right thing, accept his correction when we fail to do the right thing, and thank him for it, because whatever all else is telling us that he loves us. He loves us. And so because he loves us, he won't let us just go merrily on our way down that long path like we were illegitimate and not sons of the inheritance. We're sons of his by creation. Just like if my father wasn't married to my mother, I'm still his son, but I'm not a son of inheritance by law. So, okay, we're sons by creation, but what we want to be is sons of the inheritance. And so, if you want to be that, then God says, okay, that's what I want. but I want you to do the right thing, and when you don't, I'm gonna correct you because I love you and I want to share that inheritance with you. I want you to have that inheritance, which whatever all else it is peace with him. It has a lot of other fringe benefits, but it's what he is promising us is that we can come and sit down in his presence and not be destroyed, but be welcome. And it's like, you know, in my family, in fact, in Michigan, where I come from, when we come and visit one another, what's the first thing we do? Well, we gotta hug everybody. And when we leave, we gotta hug everybody. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what I'm saying is that that's what God wants to do. He wants us to be part of his family. He wants us to come into his presence and hug one another. That's as close as you can get. And that's what he desired. And so we shouldn't be ungrateful for whatever form of discipline takes. And in this case, we're studying specifically the Zaharat, but there are other ways that God disciplines. And we should be thankful for his discipline, and we should welcome it. And if we're struggling with something, and we know it's a struggle, and we're having trouble with it, then we should, and you may not be able to correct it by yourself, but it's okay to seek help. Someone that you can trust that won't stab you in the back when you share with them whatever the problem is, but a true friend is someone who will love you in spite of your shortcomings and will help you try to overcome them. And we've been talking about some of that, you know, about, well, who can come here? Well, we have two requirements: be decent and be orderly. We don't care what kind of a life you're living, as long as you come in here and be those two